All right, good afternoon and welcome to Ask the SCSA Wednesday webinar. My name is Justin Brooks, Safety Advisor for the SCSA, and I'll be acting as the moderator and presenter for today's webinar. Before I start the presentation, I want to take a moment to discuss a few items before we get going. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on Facebook and our YouTube channel. So if you're not following our social media accounts, make sure after the webinar, you give this video a like and a share, and follow our pages to keep up to date on safety in Saskatchewan. So I will be sharing my screen in a few moments to talk about the presentation on safety culture. But before we get going, I'd just like to take a moment to let panelists introduce themselves if you haven't met them already. Kara, you can start.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kara, Safety Advisor out of the Saskatoon office, and I handle the Melfort, Nipawin, Tisdale region.
Hi everyone, my name's Kieran Greening. I'm a safety advisor out of the Saskatoon office as well. I deal with a few different regions, up north with the Prince Albert, out west, the Macklin area, east out to Humboldt and out there, and then around Saskatoon.
It's a great idea. I should actually talk about where I'm located. So I am here in Regina, so we help out the Regina companies, but up my region is also Yorkton and Esterhazy as well. So good job, guys. So let's get into this presentation here. So I'm just going to share my screen. Share and start the slideshow. All right, here we go. All right, so every organization has a safety culture. Some safety cultures are positive and work for your organization, while others are negative and work against your organization. Safety cultures consist of safety-related beliefs, attitudes, and values that are often not talked about or noticed. It's just the way we do things around here, is often said. Your organization's safety culture is determined by your leadership, your coworkers, and your work practices. Assessing your organization's safety culture can, 1, identify aspects of a positive safety culture to further promote safety, and 2, reveal any aspects of a negative safety culture that you can work towards changing. Professor James L. Heskett of Harvard Business School wrote in his 2011 book, The Culture Cycle, that effective culture can account for 20 to 30% of the differential in corporate performance when compared with culturally unremarkable competitors. A safety culture reflects the organization's actual collective shared commitment to safety. It's not simply what is said about safety, the commitment to safety that is demonstrated by normal behavior, crucially when problems emerge or hazards are identified. Safety culture can have a direct impact on safe performance. If someone believes that safety is not important, even temporarily, then workarounds, cutting corners, or making unsafe decisions or judgment will be the result, especially when there are small perceived risk rather than obvious danger. So how do we build good foundation for safety culture? Culture change in an organization of any size is not a simple process. When it comes to workplace culture, many elements contribute to creating and sustaining a strong culture for safety. While it's likely that some of these elements vary from organization to organization, there are 4 distinct cornerstones that create a foundation on which a more effective safety culture can be built, despite complexity and variability among organizations. So Cornerstone 1 is leading indicators. Safety culture is heavily influenced by metrics. How safety is measured can fundamentally change how safety is managed, and how safety is managed is a primary contributor to an organization's safety culture. In companies with strong safety cultures, safety is embedded in daily management. It is part of the fabric of daily activity. It infuses every interaction, every decision, and every behavior. Unfortunately, in many organizations, leaders only attend to safety during safety meetings, audits, and reactively when there's an incident. The reason lies in metrics. Managers attend to what they are measured on because those measures are associated with consequences, whether those be positive or negative. Too many organizations still measure safety largely or exclusively via incident rate or similar lagging metrics such as DART, lost time case rate, severity and frequency rate, etc. Such measures tell us how many people got hurt and how badly, but they're not good measures of what leaders are doing to prevent accidents and incidents. That loop is rarely closed. Because of the natural variation in these numbers, incident rates can get either better or worse with absolutely no change in safety conditions or behaviors. The result is that organizations and departments within organizations can go for long periods of time without accidents, despite having an unsafe work environment. The statistical facts work against keeping a focus on safety. Managers and supervisors can do nothing around safety for a period of time and be reinforced with good incident rates. Such is not the case for other businesses' objectives like productivity, quality, and reliability. Those objectives tend to have much more sensitive measures and thus are more immediate with certain consequences for management behavior. In the context of these other important business objectives and their powerful consequences, it is easy for the well-intended manager or supervisor to put safety on the back burner. When the incident rate is low, one can assume all is well with safety and focus precious time on other priorities. So one important foundational step to building an effective safety culture is to change the way safety is measured. While incident rate is a necessary metric, it should be one of several. The majority of measures should focus on proactive behaviors on the part of all employees, measures that track what people are doing to prevent accidents. When there are measures of what leaders do on a daily and weekly basis to prevent accidents, immediate and certain consequences can be engineered in to ensure those activities occur. This ensures that safety is attended to all the time, not just when there are incidents. Daily and weekly accountabilities will raise safety to an equal playing field, while other business objectives help infuse safety into all parts of work. When you combine this proactive approach, you will not only see the change in the metrics tracked for frequency and severity of incidents, there will also be a direct correlation to employees controlling possible incidents before they occur. Cornerstone 2, forward-looking accountability. Accountability is essential in all aspects of business, but particularly for safety. Unfortunately, accountability too often is synonymous with blame and negative consequences. When we speak about core C-Core, there are direct ties to the audit on what each person in a company is responsible for, dependent on their level within the company. In successful safety cultures, accountability has different focus. Virginia Sharp, in her studies of medical errors, has made an important discrimination between what she calls forward-looking accountability and backward-looking accountability. Backward-looking accountability is about assigning blame, finding the individual who made the mistake and delivering punishment. While sometimes this may be the right thing to do, there are many downsides to such action, and blaming and punishment seldom results in a safer workplace. According to Sharp, forward-looking accountability acknowledges a mistake and any harm it caused, but more importantly, it identifies change that needs to be made and assigns responsibility for making those changes. The accountability is focused around making changes, building safe habits and safe physical environment that will prevent a reoccurrence, not on punishing those who made the mistake. Oftentimes, us as advisors, just as a side note, we often concentrate on this a lot with our companies, making sure that it's not about finding fault, it's about finding the fact of making it safer. Think of a near miss report. If the employee is worried they'll be blamed for their actions and face consequences, near miss reports will seldomly, if ever, be reported. This becomes a deficit in the company. At this point, nobody learns from the incident, and it can happen again to another worker, in which may result in a lost time incident or serious injury. Effective safety cultures accept that mistakes are an inevitable part of the workplace, but are relentless about learning from those mistakes. Forward-looking accountability helps minimize the fear too often associated with reporting of mistakes and ensures that organizations have the opportunity to learn from them. Cornerstone 3, good relationships. Relationships matter a lot in safety. Great safety cultures are characterized by good relationships at all levels, which enable open, honest conversations about what is working, what is not, mistakes that have been made, and what needs to change. Mistakes are a great opportunity to learn, but workers must trust if they tell management what is really going on, management won't overreact. This trust most likely is found in the context of good working relationships. Many leaders' behaviors contribute to creating good relationships. setting clear expectations, providing helpful feedback, acknowledging good work, seeking to understand problems and issues rather than blaming, active listening, follow through on commitments, removing roadblocks, and asking for feedback on your own effectiveness are some good ways leaders can build and sustain good relationships. This graph depicts the work of James M. Cousys and Barry Z. Posner. Along the y-axis, it shows the percent of direct reports who agree that management is trusted, and along the x-axis, it shows a leader follows through on promises and commitments he or she makes. You can see as you follow the graph that at the beginning, when leaders are almost never or rarely follow through on promises and commitments, they make a very small percentage of employees agree that management can be trusted. When they almost always follow through on their commitments, almost 3/4 of the employees trust their management team. Having a good relationship doesn't mean being nice all the time or being soft on safety. Good relationships include accountability and constructive feedback. Positive employee management relationships include mutual trust and respect as a foundation for a partnership around safety. Cornerstone 4, discretionary effort. Discretionary effort is that extra effort employees can give at work. And it's the extra effort employees can give at work but don't have to. Discretionary effort is going above the basic requirements. Many people think of safety as a compliance issue, getting people to comply with safety rules, regulations, and procedures. However, if you want to go beyond compliance and create a high-performance safety culture, discretionary effort is a requirement. Truly exceptional safety requires that people don't just follow procedures, comply with regulatory standards, and wear personal protective equipment. Exceptional safety happens when people look for and report hazards, give peers feedback on safe and at-risk behavior, volunteer for safety committees, make suggestions for improvement, and most difficult of all, admit when they have had made mistakes so lessons can be learned. Discretionary effort is created through the use of positive reinforcement. Research shows that when people are recognized for what they do well around safety, and when reporting problems and concerns is met with reinforcing consequences, such as joint problem solving and problem resolution, employees will be more engaged in safety. In other words, they will give a discretionary effort. A word about incentives. Don't confuse positive reinforcement with incentives. Most safety incentive systems do not improve culture. In fact, sometimes the opposite is true. Employees can get the incentive in 3 possible ways. Number 1 is employees work safely and thus earn a reward through desired safe behavior. Number 2 is employees engage in some or many at-risk behaviors, but are lucky in that none of the at-risk behavior results in an accident for the duration of the incentive period. And number 3, employees engage in at-risk behaviors, but some of those at-risk behaviors result in accidents, but the accidents are not reported in order to avoid losing incentive. Obviously, the best scenario is number 1, but how can we know which of the 3 scenarios is playing out? The goal should be to motivate employees to engage in safe behaviors that will prevent injuries, illness, and damage to equipment. Rather than an incentive program, these goals can be met through precise use of positive reinforcement for the desired behaviors. This approach ensures accidents are reduced for the right reasons, because people are working safely, and helps capture the discretionary effort that is essential for an effective safety culture. As you may surmise, these 4 cornerstones are largely the work of leaders. Leaders build the foundation for a good safety culture. Once the foundation has been built, and often before the workers see the changes in leadership, the frontline workforce will increase its contribution. It is through this joint effort and discretionary effort from all areas that organizations can create and sustain a safety culture that works. Safety and health considerations need to permeate all levels of a construction company's culture, informing decisions, planning, activities, and behavior. It's not enough to simply have safety rules, training, and protocols in effect. Leading companies nurture a comprehensive safety culture throughout their organizations from both the top down and the bottom up. A safety culture helps to ensure wider adoption of safety practices and allows companies to better reap the benefits of their safety investments. The new findings on the influence of a safety culture at a construction company, along with the striking differences from the findings in 2012, demonstrate that encouraging a safety culture is critical, that safety investments in the industry are clearly paying off, and that job site workers are increasingly recognized as playing a critical role in ensuring high safety performance at a construction company. And a little correction to my last there, I said new findings, but the findings we're going to discuss here right away are from a 2015 document. So as I said just previously, the following slides coming up on safety culture indicators are from the 2015 report by Dodge Data and Analytics titled Building a Safety Culture, Improving Safety and Health Management in the Construction Industry. A safety culture at a construction company goes beyond adopting specific safety practices and policies. Companies with a strong safety culture have a commitment to safety both from the company leadership down and from the job site worker up, where safety is a fundamental consideration in planning activities in the organization. In order to gauge the degree at which construction companies have adopted a strong safety culture, respondents in this survey were asked about the use of leading indicators of a safety culture in their organizations and, where applicable, their level of use at their companies. The respondents are divided almost evenly into three groups: high, moderate, and low. A high level of use of these indicators suggests the likelihood that these companies have a strong safety culture. The safety culture spectrum, especially a comparison of those at the high and low end, was then applied to the rest of the data gathered in the study. These findings clearly indicate that companies at the high end of the safety culture spectrum have in place more safety practices, are influenced by more factors to invest in safety, and see much stronger impacts from their safety investments than those at the low end of the safety spectrum. This chart indicates large companies are more likely to be further along the safety culture spectrum than smaller companies. This may suggest the need for more outreach to smaller companies to help provide the information and resources needed to encourage growth of the safety culture within their organizations. So some of the use of safety culture indicators. There's a wide recognition of less tangible indicators that focus on the attitudes of companies towards supervisors and job site workers, and low levels of use of indicators involving owners and specific procedural approaches. The most widely used indicators of a safety culture are encouraging workers to report unsafe conditions, holding everyone accountable for safety, and having supervisors lead by example. The least used indicators with the lowest level are joint worker management, safety and health committees, recognition and rewarding safety and health participation, owners providing incentives for safety and health performance, and owners requiring safety and health pre-certification for all bidders. The low use of incentives from awarding safety and health participation at construction companies to owner incentives for safety may reflect growing awareness of the challenge of using direct incentives that may inadvertently discourage workers from reporting potentially safe incidents. A quick example of this is a company that deducts a certain amount of safety hours from an employee due to having an incident. This will most definitely have an impact on how workers feel about reporting. More contractors at the high end of the safety culture spectrum consistently report experiencing benefits from safety than those at the low end of the spectrum, which demonstrates the powerful payback that can be achieved from committing to developing a strong safety culture and program at a construction company. The greatest differential between those at the high and low ends of the spectrum include critical success factors for contractors, such as improved project quality, the ability to attract and retain staff, and the improved project return on investment. The willingness of job site workers to report unsafe conditions is a direct result of a strong safety culture and one of its indicators. So let's go through some of those indicators, at least from this study. The first indicator is management commitment to safety. The degree of management's commitment to safety at a construction company is as critical as the commitment of workers and supervisors to establishing and maintaining a strong safety culture. Management sets the priorities for a company and can profoundly influence behaviors and attitudes of its employees. The indicators reveal the degree in which management is helping to foster a safety culture. For the first three that come up on the next slide, respondents were simply asked whether they use the practice, and the percentage that do are indicated in the next slides. The other five include not only whether the respondents adopted these measures, but the level of engagement with each. So, use of practices that indicate management commitment to safety and health. Formal processes for safety-related corrective action. Nearly 3/4, or 72% of respondents, reported that their companies have a formal process for safety-related corrective action. A formal process demonstrates to workers across the companies that management takes safety concerns seriously. Medium to large companies, all companies with more than 50 employees, are more likely to have a formal process. This may be due to formalized procedures at larger companies. However, there is no significant difference in the use of formal processes between general and specialty contractors. Making safety and health a key part of strategic planning is also in use by a majority of companies, 69%. Companies that take this approach to a proactive rather than reactive to safety concerns. The size of company. While this is a practice reported by nearly all, 94% of the respondents, from companies with over 500 employees, it's only used between half and 3/4 by smaller companies. Type of company comes into play as well. This practice is more widely adopted by general contractors at 76% than specialty contractors at 60%. Joint worker management safety and health committees. A smaller proportion of respondents than those using the previous two indicators, just under half, report that their companies have a joint worker management safety and health committee. Size of company has a particularly strong correlation with the use of this practice. It was reported that 72% of these companies with 500 or more employees, compared with only 14% from companies with fewer than 50 employees. It is likely that small companies do not feel the need for formal committees to engage the input of both workers and management on safety. However, only a little over half report adoption of this practice in companies with between 50 and 499 employees, suggesting that this practice should be considered more by mid-sized firms. Level of use of the 5 indicators of management commitment. Compared with the previous 3 indicators, all 5 of these indicators can be implemented by degree and are in wider use across the industry, with between 83 and 95% of respondents reporting these practices in place at their companies. However, the degree to which they're adopted varies. Indicator 2, safety and health are fundamental company values. A safety culture depends on recognition across the company from management to workers that the company has adopted safety and health fundamental company values. There is still a lingering perception that safety and productivity are at odds, even though many studies, including this one that we're going through, demonstrate the positive impact of safety on factors such as project schedule that are tied directly to productivity. However, 81% of respondents report that their company values safety and health at least as much as productivity. This is critical if workers are to feel sufficiently empowered to stop work or ask for changes that may have a brief impact on the productivity of a project. On the other hand, a much lower percentage, 57%, report that their company recognizes and rewards safety and health participation. This is one of the lowest scoring indicators of a safety culture in the study, but that may be due to part of the challenge of rewarding safety without inadvertently incentivizing workers to fail to report safety infractions. It is more commonly reported by general contractors at 65% than specialty contractors at 47%. A relatively high percentage, 89%, report that their companies encourage safety and health mentoring. Also notable is that the highest percentage believe that the majority of their company leadership, more than 70%, encourage mentoring, which again supports the perception that safety is valued at their company. The degree to which companies factor safety and health into planning and bidding is very similar to their encouragement of mentoring, with 90% reporting this occurs at some level, and the highest percentage, 39%, who say it occurs on more than 70% of their projects. However, a higher percentage of the general contractors, 43%, factor safety and health into planning and bidding than specialty contractors at 26%. But there were no significant differences by company type for mentoring. Indicator 3, accountability on projects for safety and health. A key part of a safety culture is universal recognition within a company that all employees are accountable for safety on projects, not just designated safety personnel. 3 indicators measure the degree to which a company fosters widespread accountability for safety and health on projects. Accountability. The first indicator reveals the wide recognition of safety accountability in the construction industry. Nearly all, 97% of respondents, feel that everyone is held accountable for safety on at least some of their projects, and a very high percentage, 73%, see this happening on more than 70% of their projects. Given how widespread this perception is, it's not surprising that there are no significant differences by company type or size on this issue. Near misses. The findings also demonstrate that near misses are being taken seriously and investigated, with most, 95%, reporting that this takes place on at least some of their projects. 60% report that this occurs on more than 70% of their projects. It's still a very high percentage, though a little short of these seeing widespread accountability in general. Use of this practice is most common at high level among companies with 100 or more employees. That sits at about 78%, but it drops off sharply among smaller companies, 42%. This may be due to larger companies have better established procedures and resources for investigation, but it is a disparity that the industry may benefit from addressing. And I know for a fact that this is something we address as advisors with all of our companies, large or small, how important near-miss reporting is. External safety and health audits. Use of external safety and health audits are far less commonly reported by respondents, with only 74% reporting this occurring on any of their projects. Less than half, 41% of them, report the use of audits, 70% or more of their projects, and nearly 1/3, 31%, report it on less than 1/4 of their projects. As with near misses, there are no significant differences between the general and specialty contractors in the degree of use of this practice, but there's a more notable difference by size of firm. Nearly half the respondents from companies with over 500 employees, 49%, report a high level of use, but less than 1/4 of companies with fewer than 50 employees report the same. It is possible that the cost of external audits as a share of overall expenses is much lower on very large projects than on smaller ones, so it may be harder for similar firms to justify the return on investment from these expenses for many of their projects. I'll take a side note here just to explain that this, considering this survey is from the United States, it does go across a lot of industries. As far as I could tell, there were no Canadian studies done on safety culture. So this isn't directly talking about safety audits in the external way from something like CORE, from our auditors for CORE, C-CORE. This is particularly talking about third-party companies coming into these construction companies and doing external audits on their safety, or even internal audits that the company is doing themselves that are separate from the daily safety activities. Indicator 4, worker involvement in job site safety and health. While management recognition of the value of safety is critical to a safety culture, it's equally important that the workers themselves are actively engaged and take in full responsibility for safety. In addition, companies need to recognize and encourage worker input on safety at all levels of planning. The study findings demonstrate that generally workers are highly engaged with safety in the industry. The 6 indicators of worker involvement in job site safety are all reported by more than 90% of respondents, although the degree to which they are used at a high level does vary. These indicators fall into 3 categories, which will be discussed in the order of frequency of use: communication about problems, stop work authority, and involvement in planning and analysis. So the first will be communication about problems. Workers are most likely to be aware of problems on site that can impact safety, or to be aware of near misses, which may indicate a safety issue that should be addressed to prevent further problems. A company with a strong safety culture will actively encourage workers to report these issues. Nearly as high a percentage, 97% of respondents, believe that workers are encouraged to report near misses in their company, and 2/3 find that this occurs on a high, 70% or more, percentage of their projects. Again, this suggests that the behavior has become a standard industry practice. The companies that do not have a strong performance in this area are not living up to the general industry standard. While a high percentage, 96%, also report that workers are asked for their input on site safety and health conditions, this is less frequently reported on a high percentage of the projects, with less than half reporting this occurs on 70% or more of their projects. Mid-sized companies, those between 10 and 49 employees, are less likely to participate in this practice than smaller or larger ones, with only 33% reporting it at a high level. At very small companies, it may be easier to have open lines of communication between workers and leadership than at large companies. It is more likely that formal communication policies are in place, which may be why these small to mid-sized companies are more at risk of not seeing this practice used on a high percentage of their projects. Stop work authority. Providing job site workers authority to stop work is a common practice, with 94% reporting that it occurs on at least some of their projects. 59% of those who report it also see it occurring on more than 70% of their company's projects. This practice is more prevalent amongst large companies, with less than half of the respondents from companies with fewer than 50 employees reporting this occurring at a high level, compared with 81% of respondents from companies with over 500 employees. This may suggest that this particular practice is most likely to be the result of a highly formalized safety procedure, which is more likely to be found at the largest companies. Worker involvement in safety planning and analysis. While still widely adopted on a general basis, these indicators see the lowest overall adoption levels of all safety culture indicators involving job site worker involvement. In each case, the percentage who report at least some activity of their companies is still very high, with 92% reporting that workers are involved with safety and health planning and 90% reporting that workers are involved in job hazard analysis on at least some of their projects. Indicator 5, supervisory leadership on safety and health. Leadership by job site supervisors is a fundamental aspect of a safety culture that is critical to support greater safety on the job site. 3 indicators suggest whether this fundamental element of a safety culture is in place, but use of them varies in construction industries. Nearly all the respondents, 97%, believe that at least some of the supervisors at their companies lead by example when it comes to safety and health, and over 2/3 of them, 68%, find that a high percentage, more than 70%, do so. It's among these mid-sized companies that a greater emphasis on this factor needs to be encouraged by the industry. The remaining 2 indicators deal with the ability of supervisors to encourage greater safety among subcontractors by either monitoring or mentoring them. Monitoring subcontractors on safety practices occurs more frequently than mentoring, with 86% of respondents reporting that monitoring is done by at least some of the supervisors at their companies, compared with 80% who report their supervisors mentor subcontractors. In addition, when factoring the level of use of this practice, an average of 63% of supervisors are monitoring subcontractors, compared with an average of 53% who mentor them. More respondents from large companies report that their supervisors monitor subcontractors, but firm size has little impact on the tendency of companies that have a high percentage of supervisor mentoring subcontractors. This suggests that while monitoring could be the result of specific company policies, the choice to mentor subcontractors is more likely to be an individual choice among supervisors. Indicator 6, company communication about safety and health. Good communication across a company is important to help sustain a good safety culture. 4 indicators directly deal with this issue. With the first 2, which deal directly with the communication of safety and health policies, respondents were asked simply whether or not these indicators were used by their companies or not. With the latter 2, respondents were asked to identify both the use of this indicator and the degree of its use at their companies. So, safety and health policy communication. Most respondents, 92%, believe that the safety and health policies are clearly communicated to all employees. A notably lower percentage, 83%, believe that the policies are communicated consistently, although this is still a very high percentage overall. These findings are relatively consistent by type of firm and by size of firms. Therefore, the findings as a whole indicate that the industry believes that safety and health policy communications are generally handled effectively. Other communication indicators, indicator 7. 92% of respondents report that at least some of their managers regularly engage with workers one-on-one. However, less than half, 40%, report that most of their managers, more than 70%, engage in this practice, and nearly the same percentage, 43%, find this engagement occurs at a moderate level for their companies. This suggests that the use of this practice varies based on the manager and is not typically formulated in the company policy. Manager one-on-one engagement with workers is also one of those few practices most commonly done at a high level by small companies, with 59% of respondents from companies with less than 10 employees identifying this at a high level, compared with 34% of respondents from larger companies. It may be easier for managers at small companies to be able to engage with their workers one-on-one, since there are likely to be fewer workers per manager. 85% of respondents report that safety and health policies are coordinated with all subcontractors. 52% report that this occurs at a high level. Unlike the previous communication indicator, this one follows a pattern of most of the others in terms of wider use by larger companies, with 66% who work for companies with 500 or more employees reporting a high level of recurrence, compared with 34% of companies with less than 100 employees. This makes it more likely that this indicator is more influenced by formalized company policy than the previous one. Owner involvement in project safety and health. While the findings indicate that owners are actively engaged in helping to improve safety and health on their projects, there's a relatively low degree of activity compared with many of the other indicators of a safety culture included in the study. This suggests that more owner engagement could help to improve safety culture across the industry. 3 of the 6 indicators of owner involvement in safety and health are noted by more than 80% of the respondents. So as we go through these, the titles are owner monitor on-site safety and health performance, owners participate in safety and health activities, owners support safety and health audits, owners require safety and health pre-certification of all bidders, and owners provide incentives for safety and health performance. The reason I went through these titles is because, specifically speaking to CORE and C-CORE, owner involvement is absolutely imperative in ensuring that this program is successful. Without owner engagement, these programs almost are never successful. So this is a very important part of obtaining CORE and C-CORE, is making sure that the owners of these companies buy into the program, into safety, and by doing this, will cause everyone else down the chain to buy in as well. So in closing, using statistics like the one seen in this presentation helps by putting something like safety culture on paper. We tend to only see statistics and records put into a form like this when we speak on incidents and accidents. Safety culture is something within a company that needs to be cultivated, and like anything, starts from the top and moves through a company. Safety culture cannot just be a few motivating posters in a lunchroom or a quick topic twice a year at a toolbox meeting or safety meeting. It has to be put in practice on a daily basis. The statistics we're using in this webinar was to show that there's not only a moral value to having a positive safety culture, but there's also a direct link between companies that have good safety culture and lower incident rates. Low incident rates as a company, as we know, can change the amount of premiums the company pays, thus having a great financial benefit. And this also has to do with productivity and motivation in workers. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. There were a lot of numbers in that presentation, so I'm well aware. I've read through it many times, and I know that it can be difficult to follow along. But if you're reviewing this again, and this study is very easy to find on the internet, you can download the PDF. It's a very interesting study. And the reason I chose this topic and chose to present it this way is because, like I said in the closing, it's very rare to see something like safety culture put on paper. In fact, if you ask a lot of people about safety culture, it just becomes kind of something that, it's not that it's unknown, it's just that it's just something that people talk about as just an attitude. To see real results like this from respondents that were taken from a bunch of companies from, less than 10 person companies to the 500 plus, these Fortune 500, these very large construction companies, shows a variance in how safety culture can be almost the same, just done differently between these large and small companies. So one thing I kind of want to open up to the panelists here is, everyone here has a lot of experience with a lot of different companies, some very large companies, mid-size and small companies. So I just wanted to give you guys a moment to share some experiences you've had with companies that have either gone from no safety culture and what they've done to improve their safety culture, or companies that had kind of a negative safety culture, not necessarily no culture, but negative culture, and have gone through the process of either CORE or C-CORE, and it's then improved culture, and how you've helped them with that.
I'll jump in first. First of all, thanks, Justin. That was a great presentation. There were a lot of numbers there, but it's cool to see it broken down and how that correlates with what the company's doing and how they're improving. As an advisor, it's like you said, we see a lot of different companies, a lot of different sizes, a lot of different cultures. So to see that kind of put down on paper is pretty cool. One thing I did want to touch on, just because I've seen it in a lot of different places, is the incentive program for reporting. So I've seen nothing being reported for fear of punishment, like you said. I've seen where companies have a minimum mandatory reporting where things are just being made up. And I've seen incentive programs where people are, again, making things up to get their name in the draw more and more often. So I think the most important thing is knowing what those numbers do for the company, so that we can, you as a company, you as a supervisor, even you as a company owner, can go through those numbers, see what's happening with your company and how you can improve it. That's one of the biggest things with safety culture, is trying to improve the program as a whole.
Yeah, and and we've talked a lot about those incentives. And I think one of the things that I found really important with companies improving their safety culture is transparency. Because a lot of workers, they still don't, and when you talk to them, I pulled workers aside and said, hey, like, let's just chat about the near misses you've had this week. And it's like they don't want to say anything because they're afraid that I'm going to help them, and they're very well schooled on what we do as an organization at the SCSA, that we just want to make you guys better. We want to make you safer. We're not out there, we're not writing tickets or anything, but they still don't want to really talk about these near misses until me. I've got a fairly, not, I wouldn't say extensive, but right out of high school, for 12 years, 13 years, I started working in the industry. So I've got tons of stories about near misses and the risks that I've taken. So until I start to open up, all of a sudden now the floodgates start opening. Now I can understand why they may not want to talk to me about near misses that they've happened, because even if they're well aware of what we do as advisors, when you walk onto site with a white hard hat and a clipboard and a safety vest, you're the safety guy, and all of a sudden people don't want to disclose that they made a mistake. But sometimes I fear that the reason why they don't want to do that has nothing to do with the vest I'm wearing. It has to do with them understanding what these near misses do for a company, how near misses, as much as, hey, it's great, nobody got hurt, even incidents to a point can teach a company. And in the last webinar, I talked a lot about corporate memory, how a lot of times companies forget that these things happen. You have turnover and people leave and people are coming in, and all of a sudden, the old guard isn't around anymore to remember these things that happen right directly within their own company, doing the exact same jobs they've done before. The only experience they have is people that have done similar jobs for other companies. And if they come from a company with a lesser safety program or a more inclusive safety program, they might not have shared the same experiences that they're walking into at the same company. So it's really important that you take down these near misses, these incidents, that they're all reported, because there's a lot of good that can come from these near misses, right? And people should be praised, maybe not in an incentive way, but even just verbally praised, saying like, hey, John Smith here reported an awesome near miss. This has really helped out our company. Just verbally saying that is no different than saying, hey, you did a great job with that concrete yesterday. We're already getting paid for the job we're doing. Hearing that we've done a great job, though, so the psychology behind it is still really good for those workers. So them having a greater understanding of what near misses are, how they help the company, and being praised for reporting them, has a lot to do with a strong safety culture. Kieran, how about yourself?
Oh yeah, well, first off, I just want to talk about some of the points you guys were talking about there. Intrinsic rewards, like Justin said, rewards that come from within are just as important as the extrinsic awards, talking about getting incentives. So if you can take pride in a job well done, that's part of a safety culture. And part of instilling that in people is helping not to have a culture of fear. So when we have a culture of fear, we're not going to report incidents as much. If we do something bad, we're going to walk in a circle for 10 minutes wondering what the consequence is going to be. And then you might ponder lying about it, changing some facts, rearranging some of the stuff on the site if there needs to be an investigation. It reflects poorly on a company in a systems failure mindset. So if you take a look at a company culture, we can define culture as a shared belief and shared values. So if we take the look at the values of the company, if I'm having an incident reporting system, is my goal number one is to find blame? Because when we're doing any sort of investigation, we're not doing it as a compliance standpoint. We're trying to find the root cause or the system that failed. So if our system that failed is always the worker did this, the worker did that, we're going to instill, pardon me, a culture of fear where not one incident's ever going to be reported. And that's not a good mindset. And that really, really reflects poorly on a company. So when we have leadership that rewards us by telling us we do a good job or coaches us, gives us good feedback, makes us fully participating stakeholders within a safety program, that is how we start a safety culture. We don't start it by saying you'll get $10,000 if you don't have an incident this year. We don't start it by saying you're going to be given 300 more hours seniority. None of those things actually matter, because those will just lead people to greed. If we start with people that have values, if their value is to go home at the end of the day and work, not because we will live to work, but work to live, and we want to be safe at work, because I know if I get a cut on my hand and I go home and I want to go lift weights or play Xbox or something like that, it can impact what I do at home. So it really does affect us in all the little fashions. So starting a culture, what I've seen on sites is honestly very poor, and it starts at that company level. If people who are in a leadership position aren't leaders and they don't empower, motivate people with training and the ability and the values and these planned values within the safety program, you're never going to have a culture that gets anywhere. You're going to have a safety system that pretends to be safe, and you're going to continue with high incident rates. The one way to actually prevent injuries, incidents, near misses, is to get your guys to actually stop and think at the start of the day. Who knows the hazards the best? The guys that do the work. Me as a safety professional, my job is to motivate them to get the knowledge, to get them training, to help them understand different processes, different parts of the safety manual, parts of the system, help them with legislation. My job isn't to own safety, it's their job. So if they own safety, we're going to have cultures sprouting everywhere that are positive, and they instill a growth mindset where we can all learn. We're all members of this company and we all matter. Every single one of our opinions should be vetted to that safety committee, the OHC, or the Joint Health and Safety Committee, whatever your jurisdiction calls it. It really just depends on your management style.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things is sometimes it doesn't matter where you work. You could be a gas station, a construction site. Everybody's, especially like in things like school or whatever, people have seen that bad seed, right? The person that complains that safety takes too long, safety cuts into my day, it makes it more difficult. Safety makes it unsafe. For example, like being on a roof with rope grabs. I think a lot of it has to do with that process. And I think everybody's kind of heard the KISS method, keep it stupid simple. And in some instances, in a very large company, the processes can be, unbelievable. And sometimes they're required to be. When you have 500 to 800 moving parts moving around, there needs to be layers of protection. But oftentimes, a lot of times I'll coach companies that are small. We're talking, anywhere between that like 2 and 20 kind of area. I consider kind of a smaller company where they're running, maybe no more than 3 to 4 jobs as a company on a whole at any given time. A lot of times I'll tell them, let's start small. Let's build that culture so that all your workers understand that safety should be an all-day event. But the reality is that documentation period, especially if you're without designated safety professional in your company. And I say that by meaning their title is safety manager. That's all they do is safety, where it's a combined effort. That portion of safety, the documentation side, doesn't actually take that long. It's the stop and think processes that everybody has to be trained on, that everybody has to really buy into. And as a company owner, you can have the opinion or the mindset to say, I pay you to do your job, you do your job, and safety is your job. But that motivating factor is so important to say, like, look, yes, it's important to me to meet deadlines. It's important to me to get the job done because that's how we make our money. Live to work, work to live, right? But you all going home at the end of the day is what's most valuable to me. I worked at a company years and years ago that was uncertified. And not to say that the culture is always, night and day between an uncertified and certified company, but you can definitely see the difference. And I ended up falling through a scaffold plank, and I came from the oil field. So coming from the oil fields, I'm like, hey, and the supervisor at the time seen it happen, and I had asked, do I fill anything out, like, because I'm okay, but I should really probably go to the doctor. I just fell like 6 feet into an excavation, probably an incident report that needs to be filled out. I thought, and he just goes, just replace the bore. Within 2 days, I was gone from that company. I left and I moved to a core certified company. At the time, I didn't really understand core certification. I just knew safety program, no safety program is what I kind of knew at that point. I was like 20 or 21 or something. But at the same time, it was night and day. The orientation, there was an orientation. There was all these different things that were put into place, signing off on all these hazard assessments. People that actually bought into safety. There was nobody, talking smack about, say, I hate doing these things. And it was people actively showing me like, hey, we need to go, what do you see? Like, they were right off the bat training. And I kept that first experience, real safety, with me. I continued on with this company for 10 years because they were so, I really liked the structure of the company, the work crews that I was with, everything about it I liked. And I had the great opportunity when the company started taking on summer students that were right out of trades and skills. So they're with us, for like 2 months. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, Brooksy, they're yours, right? Keep them busy, keep them safe, show them a thing or two and include them in on your projects. And I got to do all these really fun projects, where we were working outside and we had multiple crews working, and we had to build these toolboxes for them, separate all the different fasteners that the people in the scaffold were using. And even though it was a super simple job, I got to be able to pass on that knowledge of good safety culture, saying, hey, what's the things that can go wrong? Did you check, like, even your tools? Did we do just an inspection on your tools? Did you make sure everything was working properly? Do you understand what the job is? And you take these 15, 20 minutes at the start of every day. And the hope is that they will continue on throughout their career, that if they start working for a company that doesn't do that, they say, what's wrong? Why aren't they doing it? Like, it's not just the money now, it's what's actually different between, like, was this person that showed me all this stuff the way it's supposed to be, or was that just a one-off? And the more and more they go throughout the industry, the way it's starting to change, they start to realize that this isn't just a one-off thing. The one-off thing is a company without safety, without that culture, and that they start to realize that more and more companies are taking on safety. They start to stick with these companies. I stuck with that company for 10 years because they were a good company. They always kept me busy. They always kept me safe. And yes, of course, I had near misses. I had incidents, but I learned from those incidents. And the company, in fact, forced me in a way to learn from those incidents. We talked about them at safety meetings. We brought them up. We reviewed them months later to make sure that those corrections have been made by the safety manager that would come down and say, hey, it's been 3 months since that last incident. Even it wasn't even a lost time incident. There's really no property damage or very minimal property damage, but we would re-review those incidents to make sure I knew what had happened and that I was making and taking steps to change that. Have you guys seen that type of dedication in companies that you've worked with, and or the change in dedication between a company that just starts off? They're like, hey, what do I need to get core certified? And you start taking them through the training stuff and everything. And all of a sudden you see this shift in culture. Have you guys seen that that happen quite a bit, or has that been something that's just few and far between?
Yeah, Justin, it's been happening, and it's been happening recently as I've looked more into understanding culture and instilling culture, how to promote it within companies. I've been helping and coaching companies on how to do it. And it starts with ownership, leadership, senior management, them being fully committed to the program. If they're fully committed and they're going to put the money on the line and say, you guys are responsible for helping this company maintain a safe culture, it gives those people a sense of pride, knowing that not only are they just working, but they're helping the company. So I've seen lots of companies benefit strongly from this. And it all boils back down to a systems thinking. So if everyone in the company, even if within different departments, you're part of a system, safety is part of the big picture, the system. So if we don't have one of these things, because we all know that quality and productivity are interlinked, but safety is also there. Like I know you were talking earlier about how people think that, oh, safety will just cost me time. If you have a procedure on how to do a job step by step and you train people, are you not gaining time? If you work within these procedures and you understand time crunches, you don't take the cuts, potentially not having that injury saves more money than not wearing it ever would have. So there's huge potential for safety to have a whole bunch of different positive impacts on the bottom line, on the bottom dollar, I should say. But yeah, companies are having huge success implementing top-down safety as well as bottom-up responsibility.
So Kara, when it comes to, and Kieran kind of touched on it, when it comes to bridging that gap in safety culture, do you find you get further talking like either one-on-one or in small groups with employees, or do you find a little bit more constructive to speak to the owner and put the onus, and like I say, put the onus on the owner, and they already know it is on them, but do you find you make more progress within a company starting from scratch, speaking with employees about that culture, or speaking with the employer, hoping that they take the steps to increase that culture?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's a top-down kind of thing. It's definitely starts at the top. And I've seen companies, I've actually worked for companies where we have senior management that's totally dedicated, ready to go. And then you get down to superintendents, lead hands, supervisors. If there's a break in that chain, it's hard, man, to get the rest of everybody to buy in, because you're looking at your supervisor, your superior on site, and you're saying, well, they're not taking this seriously. They're not taking the time to make sure that everything's in place. Why should I? So it's definitely a top-down thing in my opinion. And when, like I said, when you have that break in the chain, no matter where it is, it's really hard to get that momentum going, continuing on down the line.
Absolutely. And this, I mean, can even happen with just one worker, that break in the chain, like you mentioned. And you know, and a lot of times there's different types of leaders. There's those formal leaders and informal leaders, where you have some people where they're not a foreman. They're not even really a lead hand. They're just someone people like to have lead them. And if those people have that bad attitude about safety and about that culture, that's something that those supervisors, and it's hopeful that that break isn't at the supervisor as well. But you know, those supervisors have to kind of dedicate some time to that worker and trying the best way possible to change their mindset.
Yeah, and at each level, like if you don't have compliance from a high level of management, potentially it's time to look at other options for people in that position as well. When you look at punishment, you want to punish people for having a mistake happen, but if they're going to straight out not comply with something that's going to help the company, it's a level of insubordination that potentially you're going to have to look for a different person if they don't want to comply. And that's where punishment really works the best. If you punish people for things that they choose to do, it's going to be a lot different than choosing to punish people for mistakes they make. And that's also part of implementing a safe culture, thinking if I choose not to participate in safety, I will be punished, not I might or something like along those lines. And that's where punishment is really appropriate in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, compliance is everything, especially when, you know, it's that moral obligation, but also that legal obligation that a company faces, where, they're kind of at a crossroads of saying that, attitude and skill, they don't always come in hand. They're not always mutually exclusive, right? So you want to make sure that a worker has a good balance of both. And with that, that concludes our SCSA Wednesday webinar. So I'd like to thank our panelists for being here and adding to the conversation. And I'd also like to thank all of you watching this. By watching and participating in these discussions, we're all working together, making Saskatchewan the safest construction environment in Canada. Make sure you tune in next week for Toolbox Tuesday at 10 a.m. And a reminder, there will be no webinar next Wednesday as it falls on Remembrance Day. I also want to take another moment to remind everyone that we have our webinar presentations available on our YouTube channel. These are a great resource for training and toolbox talks, especially if, like us, you're doing your meetings online. Remember to like and share this video and follow us on all social media platforms. Have a great day, everyone, and work safe.